Welcome back to the War Group of Woe, and today we have a doozy of an episode. We're going to try and tackle the Skaven Battleline. So if you don't know, I think Skaven has the most options for Battleline. I could be wrong, but just kind of off the top of my head, I think they have the largest number of individual units for Battleline. And that just comes down to their clan system and like how their subfactions are kind of wonky. But so before we get started, some few things to get out of the way. Instead of conditional battle line, I've broken this down into specific clans as well as like universal. Um, so they'll each have their own section, or at least the four major clans. Um, and in order to take the specific clan's battle line, you need to have a few conditions met. First off is you must have either the master clan subfaction or a Skaven or whatever general you have, it needs to be a part of the clan that you want your battle line to be from. And additionally, for it to be considered battle line, all of the battle line needs to be from that clan. So for an example, if you want to run Storm Fiends and Skryre Acolytes as battle line, in order for them to count as battle line, you need to have 3 separate units of any order of those for a 2,000 point game. It's a little confusing, but if you just kind of understand that for a battle line to be considered a battle line, you need to either have master clan or a general of the same clan, and the battle line needs to be all or nothing. It's either all Skryre battle line or it's not. So up first for the quote unquote universal battle line is Clanrats. These are just your run-of-the-mill rats. They have a 6-inch move, 4 bravery, 1 wound, and a 6-up save. They have 2 melee options, the rusty spears or the rusty blades. The spears have 2-inch reach, 1 attack, 2 for the leader, 5s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. The rusty blades are exactly the same except they have only 1-inch reach and they hit on 4s instead of 5s. So some unique abilities for them is 1 in 20 can have a banner, which lets the unit retreat and charge. Because they are Skaven, they're a little cowardly, so they like to retreat and then they're like, oh poop, we can charge again. Um, and then 1 in 20 can have a bell, which gives them +2 to their run rolls. If the unit has more than 10 models, you get a +1 to save. So strength in numbers, which is that is a good motto for Clanrats or Skaven in general. So these guys, they're tar pits, they're screens, they're cannon fodder, they are there to die. That is their whole point. To maximize the efficientness of this, I would take in squads of 20 to 40 and use the blades because they have a 25 mil base. They can reach 2 ranks. The only benefit to having the spears is you could have your units a bit more tight in formation instead of wide and be able to hit from the 3rd row and etc. If that's your style of play. I personally like to spread my units wide, so that's why I recommend the blades. Next we have Stormvermin. I actually kind of like Stormvermin. I think the models are neat and I think they are just good. They have a 6-inch move, 5 bravery, 1 wound, and a 5-up save. They have rusty halberds, which is like a souped up rusty spear. It has 2-inch reach, 2 attacks each, 3 for the leader, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, and 1 damage. 1 in 10 can have the same banner that lets the unit retreat and charge, and 1 in 10 can have a drummer, which gives them +2 to their run rolls. And if there is 10 or more of them, they get a +1 to their save. So I think Stormvermin are really, really useful. I think the fact that they have a fairly good melee profile, large numbers, and a rend pip is really useful in 3rd edition. Because they are more elite clan rats, they work better in terms of movement and making sure all of your models can fit in the places they need to go, and they have a native 2-inch reach with their halberds, so I think Stormvermin are pretty great, which is interesting. I would think of them as Clanrats that can do some damage. They are a little bit more expensive per model, but I personally think it's worth it. If you are going to use Stormvermin, I would take them in squads of 10 to 20. Next up, we have Clan Skryre Battleline. So for each of the great clans, there is two clan-specific battle line, and in order to take these, you need to have either master clan or a general from the specific clan you're trying to take battle line for. So first up, we have the Skryre Acolytes. I think these guys are kind of underrated, and also that's partially just because their model looks incredibly ugly. It's really, really old and gross, and nobody wants to play with those. Their stat line is 6-inch move, 4 bravery, 1 wound, and a 6-up save. Their melee profile is pretty garbage. Rusting knives, 1-inch reach, 1 attack, 5s to hit, 5s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. Missile profile. Now this is where it gets interesting. It's a poison wind globe. They have an 8-inch reach, 1 attack per model, 4s to hit, 4s to wound, 2 rend, and D3 damage. I think that this is really powerful for what it is. My thought process is you could have these Skryre Acolytes standing just behind your infantry blobs of Clanrats or Stormvermin and shoot out the initial barrage of Poison Wind to soften up whatever your Clanrats are trying to charge. Having 2 rend and D3 damage is pretty powerful. So I think these guys are a little underrated. And I also personally believe that's because their model is very ugly. If you see a third-person model out there that vaguely resembles this, I think that that'd be a good purchase to make, because these guys are pretty good. They can run and shoot, so they have a surprising amount of mobility. And if they're targeting a unit with 10 or more models, they get a +1 to their hits on the Poisoned Wind Globe. So these are your frontline supports. I think they can dish out a lot of generalist damage. Of course, they work better against hordes or bigger blobs of units with that +1 to hit, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. I think to take these guys in squads of 10 to 15, I think having a large unit of them would be great to stack some buffs, especially like more warp power because it's a Skaven unit, or no, excuse me, it's a Skryre. It has a Skryre keyword, so it can benefit from that. That seems like it'd be a really good place for that buff. But I think generally Skryre Acolytes are neat. It's a shame the model sucks. Next up, we have the Storm Fiends. These guys are pretty cool, and they have a lot of profiles and a lot of rules. So let's get started. They have a stat line of 6-inch move, 6 bravery, 6 wounds, and a 4-up save. For their melee profile, they have Doomflayer Gauntlets, 1-inch reach, 2 D3 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, 2 rend, D3 damage, Grinder Fists, which are 1-inch reach, 4 attacks, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, 2 rend, 2 damage, Shock Gauntlets, the same thing, but it has 1 rend instead of 2, and then Clubbing Blows, which is the same thing, but no rend. I'll explain the difference between all these melee profiles because when you make a unit, you have to equip them with 1 or more of these, and there's different benefits to having each of them. Their missile profile, they have the Rattling Cannon, which is a 12-inch reach, 3d6 attacks, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. The Wind Launcher, 24 inches, 3 attacks, 4s to hit, 4s to wound, 3 rend, and D3 damage. And then a Warp Fire Projector, which is a little odd. It has an 8-inch reach, and you roll a dice for each model in your target unit that is within 8 inches, and on a 4-up, it deals mortal wound. So some unique abilities. The leader model has 7 wounds instead of 6. If you equip it with the Doomflayer Gauntlets, they get a +1 to hit for a charge move. Like after they charge, they get a +1 to hit. This is a really big one here. 6 to hit on the Shock Gauntlet, score an additional D6 damage. Or not damage, excuse me, D6 hits. That is super powerful. If you've ever played against Blight Kings for Nurgle, this is really strong. And the fact that these attacks are 2 rend and 2 damage, That's insane. I think the shot gauntlets are definitely the way to go for the melee profile. You get a +1 to hit with the wind launcher if the target has 10 or more models, and it's a mortar, so you don't need line of sight. If a unit has a grinder fist, you can deep strike them pre-game, so you can put them in deep strike, but to bring them on the board, they must roll a 3+. So they're not necessarily guaranteed, and if they don't come up at the end of the third movement phase, they suffer d6 mortal wounds and then arrive. So they have a flat timer of when they can arrive or not. So here's how you equip the weapons on them. 1 and 3 can have a warp fire projector or a wind launcher, and then 1 and 3 can have a grinder fist or rattling cannon. And all of them have access to everything else that was not mentioned. So I think these guys are fantastic. They're really scary. They're kind of a jack of all trades, really versatile, and they can deal a ton of damage, and they're really hard to get rid of, real tanky. To maximize the efficientness of them, I would take in squad sizes of 3. I think if you go into larger unit sizes, it's a little bit harder to maneuver them and make sure that they all get their melee attacks in or whatever. All of the weapon choices are really good, so I think that comes down to personal preference. I think the shot gauntlets are the best melee option, and I am of the personal opinion that grinder fists deep strike ability is kind of a trap. Deep strike is useful when it is guaranteed and it's kind of reliable. You can build a strategy around this, but when you don't know if your deep strike is going to go off, it can be. I think that the grinder fist is kind of weak, not really something I would take personally. But if that is your style of play, don't let me stop you. Next up, we have Clan Pestilence. These guys have some interesting units. They look ugly and they're old, but they're interesting. First up, we have the Plague Monks. These guys have 6-inch move, 5 bravery, 1 wound, and a 6-up save. They have 2 melee profiles, either the pair of Fetid Blades or the Fetid Blades and Woe Staff. So the Blades is 1-inch reach, 2 attacks, 3s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. The Fetid Blades and Woe Staff are 2-inch reach, 2 attacks, 4s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. For their unique ability is, first off, they have a banner that whenever a model is slain, they deal a mortal wound on a 6+. So this is really why you're taking these guys, is the explosive damage when they die, making them a little bit more annoying to get rid of. 1 in 10 is a Harbinger, which gives them a +1 to run and charge. They have a native 6s to hit explode, and they get a +1 attack if they've made a charge in the same move. The leader in the unit can have the Book of Woes, which deals 1 mortal wound on a 4 to 5 d6 roll, or d3 mortal wounds on a 6 to a unit within 13 inches. So these are your glass cannon offensive units. They're there to kill something. So something to note with is the mortal wounds on slain model, like the explosion for when they die, that only counts for melee attacks. So if your opponent shoots at them or does a spell or something like that, it does not trigger the mortal wounds. To maximize the efficientness of Plague Monks, take in squad sizes of 20 to 30. You want a lot of these guys. They're your real offensive kick if you're doing horde style of Skaven. So an interesting story with these guys is I play Osiark Bone Reapers, and one of my buddies plays Nurgle, and we were playing a match once, and I was running Crematorians sub-faction. And if you don't know what that does, is it gives my army an army-wide, when a unit dies, it explodes on a 6, potentially dealing a mortal wound. So it was kind of funny because I would attack the Plague Monks. The Plague Monks would explode, causing my skeletons to explode, and it was just a funny little mess of explosions. So I think Plague Monks are neat. Next up, we have Plague Censer Bearers. These are an elite version of the Plague Monks. I don't know how useful they are. They seem a little bit funky. They have 6-inch move, 5 bravery, 1 wound, and a 6-up save. Their one melee profile is the Plague Censer, 2 attacks, 2-inch reach, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, and 1 damage. They get an additional attack if they made a charge move. And if they are near Plague Monks, you reroll hit rolls as well as bravery tests if you're wholly within 18 of a Plague Monk unit. At the end of the combat phase, they deal 1 mortal wound on a 4-up to every unit within 3 inches, and it includes non-pestilence Skaven units. So you got to keep them away because they're stinky. If you roll a 6, though, the damage is changed to D3. So they're a little bit odd. I think they are trying to be elite offensive Plague Monks, but I think to really get them to work, you need the Plague Monk support, and of course they are glass cannon. To maximize the efficientness of the Plague Censer Bearers, you want to take in squad sizes of 5 to 10. They're a little bit odd, so use them at your own risk. I'm not sure how to best use them personally. I haven't really seen them used efficiently, but just from a base analysis, you want to keep them near your Plague Monks and have them support each other. Next up, we have Clan Eshin, the sneaky assassin ninja rats. First up, we have Night Runners. These guys have a 7-inch move, 4 bravery, 1 wound, and a 6-up save. Their melee profile is stabbing blades, 1-inch reach, 1 attack each, 2 attacks for the leader, 4s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, and 1 damage. Their melee profile is Eshin thrown weapons, which is a 12-inch reach, 1 attack, 4s to hit, 5s to wound, no rend, and 1 damage, not 0 damage. That's a typo on my part. Some unique abilities is they can run and charge natively, and that's pretty powerful. Gives them a lot of flexibility in positioning and doing damage as well. They have a 2d6 pre-game move, so before the round starts, you can move them 2d6 inches, and that's pretty powerful. I wouldn't discredit that all that much. It could be really useful to get on an objective, or reposition so you're in a better place when your enemy attacks and such like that. For their throwing weapons, 6s to hit with the thrown weapons explode, scoring 2 hits. They're a hybrid skirmish unit. They can do okay in melee as well as ranged. You really want them to be annoying enemy flanks and lightly defended objectives, kind of scurrying around the outside edges of the battle. The pre-game move is interesting, gives you a lot of tools to work with. And to maximize the efficientness of Night Runners, I'd take in squad sizes of 10 to 20. You can go into larger units, but skirmish units don't do well if you scale them into large blobs of models. It makes movement a little bit difficult. Next we have Gutter Runners. These are just Night Runners, but a little bit better. They're just better in every way, but they have 5 models natively instead of 10. Their stat line is 7-inch move, 5 bravery, 1 wound, and a 4-up save. Their melee profile of punch, daggers, and blades is 1-inch reach, 2 attacks each, 3s to hit, 4s to wound, 1 rend, 1 damage. The melee profile of the Eshin Thrown Stars is 12-inch reach, 2 attacks each, 5s to hit, 5s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. They can run and shoot, have the 6s explode for the throwing stars, and they can deep strike from board edge instead of regular deploy. So these guys are just better Night Runners. They are better skirmish units, and there's just less of them. That's the main drawback. They deal more damage and they skirmish better than Night Runners. And the Deep Strike is neat. It's a good tool to have in your back pocket to kind of change up things and trick your opponent or do some other shenaniganery. Maximize the efficientness of Gunner Runners, I would take in squad sizes of 10 to 15. I think these guys are good enough that you would want to max one squad out if you really enjoy Gutter Runners and you like the skirmish playstyle. Last but not least, we have the Clan Battleline. So, probably the bottom of the bottom barrel is giant rats. Not only are these models horrifically ugly, they're really bad. Like, I don't know how or what you'd use these things for. They have an 8-inch move, 3 bravery, 1 wound, and they don't get a save. They have vicious teeth, 1-inch reach, 1 attack, 4s to hit, 5s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. If the unit has 6 or more models, you get +1 inch of reach and +1 to wound rolls. They're cheap, but beyond that, they're really bad. Like I, I really don't know what you'd want to use these things for. Uh, they're not durable. They don't do any damage. They are just cheap. I would not use them. If you are planning to use them, run them in squads of 6 or 9, I guess. Really, I don't think you should run them at all though. Next up we have the Rat Ogres. These are just baby Storm Fiends. They have a stat line of 6-inch move, 5 bravery, 4 wounds, and a 5-up save. Their melee profile, tearing claws, blades, and fangs, have 1-inch reach, 4 attacks each, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, and 2 damage. Their missile profile is a warp fire gun. It has a 16-inch reach, 1 attack, 5s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, and D3 damage. 1 in every 2 can have the warp fire gun, and 6 is to hit with the tearing claws, and their melee weapon score 2 hits. Rat Ogres are light Storm Fiends. They're an elite choice, and they're fairly cheap for what they do. If you're wanting to take them, I would maximize, or excuse me, if you're wanting to maximize the efficientness of Rat Ogres, take a minimum squad size of 2. I think if you get any bigger than that, it's not very good. I mean, you can, but that's just my thought process on it. And that about wraps up the Skaven Battleline. It was a really interesting research project, these guys. They have a whole bunch of options tailored for each of the 4 major clans. And I noticed a pattern where it seems like there was a horde style unit for each of the clans, and then there was an elite version of the same model, like the Plague Censer Bearers versus the Plague Monks, or the Night Runners versus the Gutter Runners. The only 2 outliers would be the Skryre and Molder, but just a thought I had. An interesting idea, though, would be instead of Clanrats or something, run big blobs of Gutter Runners. They just seem like more offensive Clanrats. I don't know how efficient that would be, but Gutter Runners seem kind of useful. I'd have to talk to some other Skaven players and see what they think on the matter, but yeah, Gutter Runners would probably be a standout pick for me for what I didn't quite expect. Yeah, well, so Skaven, that's Skaven Battleline done. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or a comment. And if you have a suggestion for a future video, please leave that in the comments as well. And if you'd like to see more Age of Sigmar tactics and content, please consider subscribing. I try to upload once every other day or once every day. And yeah, so I'll see you all next time.